After many years and many, many victims, today there was justice. It was a long wait. It was a long trial. There was a lot of hardship and pain and suffering. But with the jury's verdict today, there is now justice. Defendant Shannon O'Connor was convicted of more than 60 crimes against more than a dozen child victims from Los Gatos. Every child who testified, the jury convicted the defendant of a charge involving that child. The charges included child endangerment, annoying and molesting a child, dissuading witnesses from testifying, and facilitating the forcible sexual assault from one child on to another child. We expect as parents that we protect children, protect our children, protect other people's children. This defendant took advantage of children, manipulated children, hurt children emotionally, mentally, physically, and did that for her own perverse reasons. And today there's justice for what she had done. It's important to recognize the victims who testified and their families, their parents who supported them during this very difficult ordeal. This case does not happen if the children do not come forward and stop what this defendant was doing. Without the children, the conduct continues. So our first thanks and appreciation is for the child victims in this case who came forward. This is a case that few law enforcement agencies, other than the District Attorney's Office Bureau of Investigations, could investigate. There were hundreds of individuals interviewed. There are terabytes worth of information. Phone calls, jail calls, videos, social media. And investigator Christina Hanks from the District Attorney's Bureau of Investigation was the lead investigator and brought all of this evidence together. Without her, this case doesn't happen. This case began with Rebecca Wise, who's standing to my right, who did an enormous amount of work on this case. She's such a good prosecutor, I then promoted her, and we then handed this case to Joanna Lee and Morgan Willis. And they put together a powerful and compelling presentation to the jury in a trial that took months, 4 months to try this case, 63 counts, more than 20 witnesses testifying, just a tremendously complex case. And they put it together in a very strong and compelling way, which allowed the jury to come back with a verdict of more than 60 guilty counts, and the defendant looking at decades and decades in prison. Because of Joanna's efforts and Morgan's efforts, there's justice and there's accountability. I think one thing, honestly, that Joanna and Morgan did that I thought was extremely compelling is they had photographs of the victims at the time that this defendant committed her crimes against them, and you could see they were children. And then she had a photo next to that of them as what they look like today, 6 years later. And so I think that really helps to capture the long-term effects of what the defendant did to the victims in this case. I am incredibly grateful that we have investigators and prosecutors that work in the DA's office that are as committed as they are. They're excellent, they're smart, but they're dedicated. Investigator Hanks was dogged in this investigation and uncovered more and more criminal activity, more and more victims, And without her dedication, working with Rebecca Wise, we would not have found all of these victims, and we wouldn't have gotten the full measure of justice. You know, it's if there's 15 victims, we want all 15 victims to be heard, to reflect the seriousness of the crime. Every victim is important, and the defendant should be accountable for everything that she did. And then to, have one prosecutor and one investigator working diligently on this case for 4 or 5 years, and then bringing in a new team several months before the trial was very challenging for Miss Lee and Miss Willis. But I asked them to do it because I knew they would, and I knew they would do a great job. And that's what they did. They understood the seriousness of this case, the gravity of it, how important it is to our community, and they worked their asses off. And I think the jury verdict reflects their prosecutorial excellence. And I know that Rebecca and Investigator Hanks and Joanna and Morgan have had innumerable conversations with the victims and their families and keeping them updated about what's happening. And our office has a victim services team that has been in constant communication with the victims in this case. We never lose sight of the victims, and while we're focused on winning in court and making sure the defendant's held accountable, we're also incredibly focused on helping the victims heal and recover from this kind of violation and criminal activity that was committed against them. And we're just so profoundly grateful to the victims for coming forward and putting a stop to this. The defendant manipulated them and used them and then tried to get them not to talk. And these children and their families were resolute and overcame that, and it's their resilience that led to this verdict.